Hey guys, it's me Rocky. So I'm making this video to show you some drills that you can do to help strengthen your psoas, iliopsoas. I hear often from people, and I myself have said in the past, that my psoas is really tight. My hip flexors are really tight, and while that might be the sensation that we feel, tightness, it's not quite an accurate representation of what's happening in the muscle tissue. So if your psoas is sort of fixed at what we call a concentric length, meaning it's a shortened state. The way to get your psoas to lengthen is not to pull on it and make it longer, but actually to learn how to stabilize it at progressively longer and longer lengths. So eccentric strength training or eccentric stabilization of your psoas is what's needed to functionally increase its length. No point in making your psoas longer if you can't stabilize it at that length, and more often than not, your body won't let you do that anyway, and that's what the feeling of tightness is. So you can go on Google to get any number of images on the psoas, where it inserts, where it originates, its attachment points, what it looks like, so on and so forth. But what's most important to know is that your psoas, iliopsoas group, is responsible for flexion at the hip joint. So in an open chain movement, or when your legs are moving relative to your torso, flexion looks like this. So it's the movement of your leg out in front of you. In a closed chain movement or a proximal movement, shortened psoas or concentrically contracted psoas is going to pull your torso relative to your leg. So oftentimes the symptoms that we see of a shorter psoas in posture is sort of an increase in this anterior pelvic tilt. Okay, the psoas attaches all the way up at the front top portion of your lumbar spine, so it's going to pull forward like this. Or what can sometimes happen as it attaches all the way down here to the lesser trochanter of your femurs is it can pull your femurs forward. Okay, so folks that usually say they have a tight or a shortened psoas are going to have a natural posture that looks something like this or something like this. So follow along with these drills. They're meant to be done progressively. They'll help to bring your psoas online so you can get more innervation of nervous tissue into the psoas, and then progressively work longer and longer intervals of length and load to help train it to become a functional, strong muscle. It's a really important muscle, and sometimes we beat up on it a lot. Okay, so we want to make it strong and supple. Check it out. All right, so the first thing you're going to do when you stand, do your best to keep your pelvis neutral. And you're going to do what's called a pelvic list. So you'll shift your weight into one leg and then suck as if you were sucking up a straw from your foot all the way into your pelvis, all the way into your trunk. So we're connecting your leg to essentially the base of your thoracic spine, which is where your psoas originates, and feel that pulling action from your inner thigh, which is the lower insertion of the psoas, all the way up towards the front part of your lumbar spine. Okay, and if those terms are not familiar to you, just imagine that you could pull from your foot up to your lower ribs. And this will help to turn your psoas on while you stand. Usually this is done to help stabilize the standing leg, but functional exercise as well for the hovering leg. Then once you find that stability, you can practice a bit of mobility and track flexion and extension of your hip. You want to make sure that as you do this, your leg doesn't sort of excessively swing, but that your pelvis more or less stays level. So this is asking your psoas to stay alert and stay switched on as you move your leg into a wider range of motion, flexion and extension. It's called a pelvic list. Okay, the next exercise that we'll do is to strengthen the hamstrings, which are going to help create the posterior pelvic tilt necessary to lengthen the psoas. So lying on your back with your legs straight, you'll press into your heels and lift your tailbone up towards the ceiling. This is an isometric hold. I'm doing it kind of short here for the video, but you can practice anywhere from a 10-second to a 30-second hold for each of these positions. By bending your knees, you're shortening the hamstrings, which teaches them how to engage concentrically more and more and more. Definitely a necessary component to assisting the natural, or rather the neutral pelvic tilt that creates a longer psoas. Okay, this will be the only passive exercise that we'll do. It's designed to release the iliacus. Most of you will be fine with just a medium block underneath your pelvis. I usually need 1.5 just because my shins and femurs are quite long, as is my spine, my whole body really. So placing a block underneath your sacrum, closer towards your tailbone, you can bend your knees and just allow the front of your pelvis to release And then either on the 2 blocks or the 1 block, you'll pull one knee into your chest. This will posteriorly tip your pelvis. Pull your other knee into your chest. And then have that same sensation from the pelvic list. So you're not going to let your leg dangle, but rather you'll straighten and extend your leg, rather straighten and bend your knee. First moving sort of at a 45, then closer towards a parallel angle with the floor. And you'll feel, assuming you keep the one knee drawn in towards your chest, lengthening of your psoas. It will not fully release because it has to support the weight of your leg. Okay, so by holding, you're working an isometric contraction of the psoas with the load of your leg in that somewhat extended position. Okay, now we'll go back to the sort of the starting point of the passive stretch, and we'll add some load so we can, again, train the engagement of the psoas. So I like to put a bolster or even a folded up blanket on my shins. It doesn't have to be very heavy, but you'll place your pelvis on the prop, place the bolster or blanket on your ankles, lower shin, and then work to straighten your legs. And then from this position, isometrically push up into the bolster as if you could lift it off the floor. Right, so you're creating isometric hip flexion, and that isometric hip flexion is going to ask the psoas to engage. You'll feel your tailbone lengthen forward a bit when you do that, and your abdominals engage. It'll feel like your abs, but it's really just the muscles down deep in your core. And this is one that I would hold, again, for anywhere from 15 seconds up to 45 seconds. And when you do this, it's ideal that you only engage at about, at most 70% of your maximum effort. So don't make yourself crazy trying to work too hard here. Functional strength is not a hard or aggressive strength, it's an efficient strength. So push up into the bolster as much as you need to feel that recruitment, and then stabilize at that range. Now, once you get stronger in doing this, you can increase the load by actually flipping over and putting your pelvis and ribs on the bolster. With your feet untucked, you can take your forearms to the floor and then push your feet into the floor, much like you did pushing up into the bolster. So again, isometrically flexing the hips. And this will cause your ribs and your pelvis to lift up off of the bolster. And this can be a hold that you do again for time, right? 15 to 45 seconds. Okay, the next exercise will be an asymmetrical lunge. This will increase the range of extension in your back hip. So coming into the lunge position, you'll press your knee isometrically forward, your back knee isometrically forward to switch on your hip flexors, and then bend and extend your front leg, right? Bend and straighten rather, as you go progressively deeper. And only go as far as you can go without losing that isometric push of your back knee forward. As soon as you dump into the hip, the psoas actually shortens and your ribs are likely to hinge forward, which indicates that. Okay, you can up-level the load by lifting your back knee and then likewise pulling your back foot isometrically forward. Okay, and you'll do this on both legs, of course. In your trunk, instead of thinking about a big back bend here, just lift up through the crown of your head. And again, the main action is the pulling of your back knee forward to turn on the psoas as you move the hip into deeper extension. Okay, and then to deepen the knee flexion and actually get into some even deeper hip flexors here, you can take your back shin up the wall. You'll feel the stretch start to migrate down into your thigh. And then push your foot strongly into the wall. Again, you can take your knee and pull your knee isometrically away from the wall. And then progressively move your pelvis closer and closer towards the wall. You can move in and out several times, and you'll for sure feel something happening here. Right, and I'm aiming my pelvis for the wall just inside of my heel, but not too far, so the heel should make contact with the hip. Okay, this will actually get us into some other hip flexors, rectus femoris, which assist the psoas. Okay, and then to put all these pieces together, you can do sort of a variation of Virabhadrasana 3 with hands on tall blocks. You'll come into Ardha Uttanasana and then create that pelvic list action again so that your leg just doesn't swing back, but rather you integrate and stabilize the psoas as you then extend the hip and move the leg back behind you. So you should have the sense again that your foot is connected muscularly all the way up to the front top portion of your lumbar spine, your bottom ribs. And see how high you can lift your leg without dumping, rather, or releasing the recruitment of the psoas. Okay, so this is going to take your psoas into a long range. We're adding in now the hamstring activation, that we did in the beginning to help lift the load of the leg.
So definitely try that on both sides, and then you can stand up and see how you feel. If you want to finish with a passive release, you can set yourself up in this way with your upper back on a bolster and your head elevated on a pillow so that your spine is in flexion, but your hips are to be neutral. So we don't want to flex or extend the hips, but rather lengthen the lower back as much as possible, and that's going to release more of the upper attachment points for the psoas major. So this can be a nice position to put yourself in your restorative practice, or sort of in lieu of shavasana, or just even when you're hanging around the house wanting more of a passive release. So give this a try. Let me know if you have questions. I know this is sort of a short, quick video, but I'll be recording more stuff soon, and actually we'll have an online course coming out in the near future that will outline further exercises and drills that you can do for all parts of your body to increase mobility and stability, which really are the same thing. All right, guys. Here's to happy, healthy psoas. Peace.